You probably remember Static Shock like this,
I better get frequent flyer miles for this,
rather than remember him for this. That's right. Like most other superheroes, Static was a comic. And then through the vast rich history of the character itself and Milestone Comics, the rise of a new character in the 90s that got so popular that DC started fully embracing the character. Within the fast rising popularity of Static, DC has to decide, where does Static fit in? So, about a year ago, I made this same Static Shock video you're watching right now. I wanted to rework a few things with the edit, and since some information actually has been updated based on said info from last year, I figured adding some new 2021 info about Static Shock in here as well would be a bit fun. Okay, back to 2020, Jordan. There are two very different versions of this iconic character. For me, Static was this awesome animated TV show from my childhood. The character was so cool and made me wish that I was able to stand up and make a difference in my hometown. You know, just without all the superhero parts. Like, I'm not just gonna go out there and punch someone for no reason. No, I like help an old lady cross the street, recycle. But this iteration of Static isn't the only version. In fact, this isn't even the original iteration either. Static actually was first a comic book series in the 90s that dealt with a lot more adult, more cultural, and more impactful themes. Ain't that right, Comic Drake?
So, Static is a character that comes from Milestone Comics. They're a company that had an exclusive publishing deal with DC, and they focused more on African-American characters since the mainstream superhero industry really didn't have all that many. And even though their Superman parallel icon could be considered to be the face of Milestone, Static ended up being way more popular and ended up getting that spot for himself.
Static was such a unique character. Even though he was touted as a Spider-Man-like hero due to him having some similarities, he still stood tall above a lot of others for me, carving his own right not to just be compared to Spider-Man. I also love the character of Virgil Hawkins, not him just as his superhero persona Static. Virgil himself is a very smart, kind, and caring kid navigating high school, dealing with stuff the average everyday teenager would have to be dealing with at that time. And on top of that, outside of school, having to grow up without his mother and listen to his dad who wants to make sure he focuses on his education and never ends up being involved with any gangs. The show never shied away from jumping into deeper topics of race, class, and experiences that not everyone can relate to, but was important to educate yourself on. And in the early 2000s, there weren't many shows focusing on bringing these stories, these ideas, all to light. And I'm glad I was able to grow up with a show like this. Now, the show obviously was toned down compared to the comics because the show was made for a kid audience and to connect Static to the broader DCAU, or the DC Animated Universe. From 1992 to 2006, this 14-year span saw the coolest of crossover series, starting with Batman the Animated Series, then Superman the Animated Series, and then lots more Batman, of course. The New Batman Adventures, Batman Beyond, and skipping ahead ending with Justice League Unlimited. But smack dab in the middle was a show that captured my attention over most others, and yes, that was Static Shock. His involvement was great, how they used him as both being this big important hero, but also keeping him as this protector of Dakota City. And all of these shows would cross over into each other. I mean, look how many crossovers happened in Static Shock alone. Oh wait, is that Shaq? They even got Steel himself in this? And Little Romeo?
It's Little Romeo.
Neat. The show lasted for 4 seasons, ultimately ending its animated run in 2004. But let's talk about the origins of the character, starting with the show. And in the show, Virgil gets mixed up in this sketchy situation with some gangbangers, leading to a big fight in a chemical storage facility. Yeah, that is a lot for a kid who is just going to school. But the police come in and start tear gassing the area, and a series of chemical explosions went off, affecting a large area dubbed the Big Bang. And that's just a theory. Ow! Anyone affected by these chemical explosions started to develop weird and unique powers. They were known as the Bang Babies. And Virgil himself wakes up to find that he's Staticky? Okay, to be more specific, electromagnetism.
So the Static in the original comics is a little bit different from his cartoon counterpart. Like, he was anti-Semitic, although he did learn his lesson at the end of the issue. But what fascinates me the most is the reason that Virgil was at the Big Bang in the first place was because he got a gun and was trying to shoot his high school bully in revenge, and the explosion happens, he got his powers, and yeah, I don't remember that in the original cartoon.
Oh man.
Since then, Static has become the most popular character that Milestone has ever created. And one thing that I really like is that they really focus on Virgil's intelligence, as he has to find a lot of unique ways to defeat his enemies. It's something that you really don't see all that often in characters, especially black characters.
So we have two different but similar origins, as well as an interesting lineage of crossovers throughout the show and the comics. It was honestly amazing to see such an awesome character like Static be a part of some big experiences with other iconic superheroes. I love that as the show went on, we get to see Virgil's best friend Richie not only being involved as the gadget man to help out behind the scenes for Static, but later on to join him, as over time exposure from the chemical blast in the Big Bang gave him this super intelligence, allowing him to create his own superhero gear to help him fight, and called himself Gear. But what does the future hold for Static Shock? Well, in the case of the show's universe, he becomes one of Earth's greatest heroes, and is a part of the Justice League. In the season 4 premiere episode, Future Shock, Static in this episode is taken to the future to help the future Batman, aka Terry McGinnis, aka Batman Beyond, as they race to rescue the future adult version of Static. It was storylines like this that helped set Static Shock apart from other similar superhero shows. It played around in so many other shows' storylines that it felt like it was a look behind the curtain of what else is happening in this universe and how Static plays a bigger role in it all than let on. And that's how Static was actually fitting into this big puzzle. He may not be the character that you're looking at if the Justice League are assembling, but the role he plays is much more important than what you see on the surface. Static has proved himself smart, useful, and a valuable member of any team he's on, or even if he just needs to handle a situation in Dakota by himself. So like the cherry on top of a milkshake, Static actually feels like he's completing the full package here. He can weave in and out of all these different heroes' storylines or even his own, and can complement anything going on. There's no wonder why this character blew up for Milestone, and how popular he once was and, well, still is, even if we don't see him around as often as of late.
Additionally, Static was at the forefront of the Milestone DC crossover, and when the two universes ended up actually fusing together later on down the road, they brought him into the Teen Titans. And of course, you know, this kind of bled into where we saw him in the Young Justice cartoon. He's really become a big part of the DC universe, and then he just went away. We did get to see a Static solo series when the DC Universe rebooted with the New 52, but that was pretty short-lived and he was gone pretty soon after. However, the Milestone universe is going to get its own reboot in 2021, and I imagine that Static is going to be at the forefront of all of that, so thankfully there's a lot to look forward to.
2021 Jordan back again. So that Milestone revival? Well, yeah, it happened. Earlier this year in June, the new Static comic series came out. And funny enough, Comic Drake from this exact video has some content related to it if you'd like to check it out. It's set to be a 6-issue series, and it sets itself as a new reintroduction to who Static or Virgil is.
As far as Static in any other medium outside of the comics, there really hasn't been anything. And something I found surprising is actually the video games. There is a substantial lack of Static Shock video games. When you think of popular cartoons or comic book characters, you think, oh, there's probably a few games for that. And yeah, there is literally a few games, and that's exaggerating a bit. The one true game is the Game Boy Advance game, which is fine. It's nothing too crazy. It's pretty cool, you know, take Static Shock on the go. Why is it always midway? You can also take them on the go in the mobile version of Injustice Gods Among Us. And hey, if that's your thing, well, congratulations, I guess. And then of course there's an old browser flash game of Static, and it's something to waste some time with back in the day. So there wasn't a lot of Static Shock video games out there. Weird. Thanks to a recent DC event this year called DC Fandom, filmmaker Reginald Hudlin confirmed to fans of Static Shock that right now there have been serious conversations regarding a live-action Static Shock movie. Going on to say, when we spoke to Jim about reviving the Milestone line, we said, "Look, we all know this has been a hit comic book and a hit animated series. It's time to expand back into all those areas and then some. So we're in serious conversations about developing the Static Shock movie. That will be a theatrical feature film." I think my heart just stopped. Well, the future does seem to be looking pretty bright for such an awesome character who I hold dear to my childhood. And while re-watching the show and starting to really dig deeper into the comics, I found myself re-falling in love with the series of Static Shock the same way I did growing up. And I cannot wait. Well, I have to wait, but I'm really excited. I'm still waiting. I want to give a huge thank you to Comic Drake for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for having me. I really enjoy talking about comics, which is exactly what I do on my channel, Comic Drake. Plug, plug, plug. If you like comic books, well, I'm your guy. Like and subscribe.
Please go over and check out his never-ending comic book wisdom. Links to his channel are down below in the description. This was a shockingly fun video to make. I hope you guys did enjoy it. Please hit that like button, hit subscribe. I'll catch you in the next video. Until then, bye-bye.
Fight the criminal, chase the bad guys, save the world, fly to the sky. Have kid, I'm amazing. Okay, stand shot.